Hey now, it is time for some damage control. Let me explain. So, ignoring this tangle of wires here, let me explain what's going on. Just about 3 weeks ago, I brewed this batch of Kölsch, which had an original gravity of 1049. I fermented it on the cool end, like about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, for almost a week, and then I started to ramp the temperature up, and it wound up peaking at 66 Fahrenheit, and I let it sit there for a week, at which point it looked like activity was done. Now, I needed the space out in my garage just because of the cool temperature so that I could ferment some German Pilsner, so I brought these guys downstairs and basically left them at basement temperature, which was about 63 Fahrenheit. Now, I checked on this a couple of days later, only to find out that the gravity was sitting at 1020, which I found very upsetting. There was still some activity, but it seemed to have slowed down. So I wound up rousing them quite a bit. Thought, well, it's in the mid-60s down here. It should be okay. However, now almost 3 weeks later, it only dropped 2 points. I checked all 3 carboys. They only dropped 2 points, so they're still sitting at 1018. Forced attenuation test came in at 1012, so there's at least 6 points that I want these guys to go. So I threw these a day and a half ago. I threw the temperature probe in this one here. They're all connected to the same temperature controller. I've got the heat wrap on here and got them back up to 66. There is still activity, and I have been rousing them a few times a day so far, but I want to try to kickstart a little bit more fermentation. So the way I'm going to do that is to take some sugar syrup, and I'm going to dose 2 of these carboys with approximately 100 mils each of a sugar syrup, which will be 50-50 sugar to water. And this third one is going to get a dose of some pineapple. And the hope here is that just a little sugar addition in both of them should tell that yeast, yo, it is time to get busy, and we'll see if we can get them to crunch down. So let's make some simple syrup. So here we have the pineapple, and it's at 140 degrees here, and I'm just kind of wrapping up here actually. This has been in here for a few hours, which is definitely more time than I needed for pasteurization. However, I'm also hoping just to kind of break stuff up a little bit and make all the sugars a little bit more accessible. I find with my fruit additions to beer that this warm steeping process is really quite beneficial just for getting that fruit flavor in there. And this is a 600 gram package of what was originally just frozen pineapple. So just in the interest of speeding this up, I've got 125 grams of sugar in this pot, and I'm adding 125 grams of water to it. And then I'm going to heat it up here on the stovetop until it's dissolved, and then I'm going to wind up actually putting it into a flask to pasteurize. So I'm just going to get this on here and get it heating up. All right, so I got that all nice and hot. And now I'm just going to add it to this flask so that I can get it onto my heat plate and pasteurize it in a slightly more controlled environment. Perfect. And see, so that wound up being just over 200 mils after everything combined. All right, so after pasteurizing this, I had it between 145 and 150, and it actually got around 45 minutes, so I know we're totally good on this. I'm going to be ready to throw this into the carboys. All right, so I'm just going to pop this out. Now, actually, I'm going to wind up replacing 2 of these here with airlocks, because I need some of these thermal wells and blow-off tubes for a couple other carboys that I'm using. So in the meantime, I'm going to grab this pineapple, and I've let this cool down so it's not going to be too hot going into there. I'm just going to snip that off and add it here. So this is one of the nice things about getting it in the sous vide, is a lot of that juice actually extracts from the fruit. Whew, smells like pineapple. And I've, of course, sanitized the funnel and this wooden spoon, as I need it to plunge the pineapple into here. It's an interesting looking operation. Fortunately, the sugar syrup's going to be a lot easier to deal with. And I've star sanded some aluminum foil. I'm just going to pop onto these carboys until I'm ready to throw those airlocks on them here right away. Ta-da! All right, so foil this for a minute, and I've got my simple syrup. So again, it looks like it's, by the demarcations on here, just over 200 mils. So it's a little bit warm, but pop this off, and we're going to get right about now. I'm starting to burn my hand. Perfect. This is the one that I'm going to leave on here. I need this because it's got that thermal well. And we'll pop this off. Perfect. And tap that. So now I'm going to get the airlocks. Actually, I've already got them sanitized. So I'm going to quickly just rouse this a little bit. Mix that up. And now I'll get my airlocks and everything on here. So there we go. Airlocks on. Man, I hate these things in comparison to the carboy hoods, but there we are. So we'll see if this takes off. Well, the next morning, definite activity happening here in this pineapple one. A little krausen there with the floating pineapple chunks. We have some activity here in from this carboy here that had the simple syrup, and same thing with this one here. So yeah, definitely some activity. I think I will probably still rouse it occasionally throughout the day for the next couple of days, just rousing up that yeast, kicking it up, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get done what we want done. So I have a little helper here, and actually a second helper, a little too short for the video. We're a weekend after dosing these. I did jack the temperature up to 73 Fahrenheit here as well, just to give that yeast as much of a chance as possible. And now I'm just going to quickly thieve a sample. I've got these two graduated cylinders in this beaker here. They're all star sand and everything. Just because I don't want to have to continuously star sand this beef in between. I'm just going to do this. Just hold that still. Perfect. So these are still producing a little bit of CO2 right now. However, the yeast is dropping out quite quickly in between rousings, and I've been rousing probably 3 or 4 times a day. So I want to check on them because we might be at the end here. Even though some gas is being produced, it could be done attenuating. So let's just find out. Some good helpers here.
Beep beep.
And very excited about this pineapple Kölsch to see how it's turning out
Hi.
here. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. And this.
Daddy, do I hold this one now?
Yeah, you can hold that beaker for me too. And ooh, there we go. I can get it. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to chill these down to 60 Fahrenheit because that's what my hydrometer is calibrated for, and then we will test the gravity.
Bye. Bye, bye, bye.
Thanks, helpers.
Bye, bye. Get your hands out of there.
So a little update here. These two carboys that received sugar syrup, and this was basically a week ago, they have been producing carbon dioxide here. However, they actually haven't moved gravity-wise. This pineapple one here has dropped down to 1014 and is still producing gas. So I'm going to operate under the tentative assumption that it's going to get where I would like it, but we need to do something about these. So on to the next step. So I kind of hate to do this, but I am going to be dosing with EC-1118. It's a super strong yeast, and it should be able to crunch through those remaining sugars that we're looking at. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to be actually rehydrating them. So I'm going to put right around 150 mils worth of water in here. That might actually help me cheat and drop a little bit here too, gravity-wise. But that's not actually the purpose of doing this. I just want to make sure that this yeast has a nice chance to rehydrate. I'm also going to dose with a bit of this yeast energizer here, which I haven't used before, but I'm going to try it here. Just going to add a little bit to each of these. Oh, look at that. I managed to wreck that bag. Huh. What's going on with the bag here? What? Okay, that's that's super weird. It's actually sealed in along here, so when to open it, it just tore. So let me just grab a pair of scissors. And this is going to wind up having to go into a different bag. So let's just snip that. And this says a ½ teaspoon per gallon of wine must, but I don't know. Since I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, I'm going to use about a teaspoon per. I am adding a lot of yeast for each of these as it is, and that should be okay. All right, let's get these pasteurized. So I've got these flasks here just on a medium heat, getting them heating up. I also threw a stir bar into each of them just so I can make sure that the yeast is all nice and creamy after it's gotten rehydrated. And I'm going to take these to just like a nice simmer and give them probably 15 minutes or so, and then it's time to cool down. Here's that nice gentle simmer that I've got them at. And I'm just going to leave them here for 10 minutes total. I'll turn it off and just let them cool down here to room temperature on the stovetop. Hopefully I haven't damaged anything that's in that yeast energizer. I didn't really look up what's in it and if it's temperature sensitive or anything. If so, well, whatever. I guess it wouldn't have gone in anyway because I wouldn't have been comfortable just dumping in the powder to the carboys just because of possible sanitation issues. Fingers crossed. Okay, so these flasks have cooled down to room temperature. I've got this whole surface here star sand, so it's sanitized. And I'm just going to, I like to flame the scissors a little bit after they've been star sand because it helps actually pool the sanitizer on it. Just make it easier to get rid of so that I'm not getting a bunch of liquid right around the opening that I'm going to be cutting on these dry yeast pouches here. So I'm just going to deal with that first one. And I like to star sand the actual countertop here as well, just so that when I put that foil cap down here, it's on a sanitized surface, even though I do take care to ensure that it's still kind of poofed out and the part that's actually coming out of the flask isn't actually touching anything. All right, so I'm going to let these sit here for probably 15 minutes or so, 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll see if they are ready to get going with the stir bar there. Okay, so this has had a little rehydration time here. It's time to, I'm just going to set these on my stir plates and let them get all nicely mixed up. And you can see that there's some of that yeast that's around that edge there. I'm just going to kind of spin these flasks just to scoop that off there so it gets mixed in. So here we are after just kind of kicking off these. I'm going to turn them down just a little bit here, but I'm going to let them go for a few minutes. Okay, so it is time to add this yeast. I've got a sanitized piece of aluminum foil down here that I'm setting that on. Now, I'm just going to, there's a magnet there on that stir bar. It's the last second swirl. I think I might actually reserve just a little bit of yeast out of each of these and dump it into that pineapple one just because. So there's that one. Pop that back in there carefully. Nice. This next one, of course, is trickier with the thermowell and everything. But particularly trickier since I forgot to deal with the stir bar right off the bat. Fortunately, where is it at here? Kick it down to that side. Nice. Okay. Crisis averted. I'll pour most of that into there, reserving just a little bit. Okay. Just quickly set this back onto that foil. We'll add these. A little bit of yeast. Just in case this needs any encouragement to wrap up the job here. Probably unnecessary. However, we shall do it. Okay, now I'm just going to give these guys one of these flasks so I don't accidentally break them. And just rousing. Mix that yeast all throughout. And you can still see here, like there's obviously CO2 in solution. Yep. And with this one too, just for good measure. All right, so these are still sitting at 73, and I'm going to let them sit here for a few days. I'm just going to observe what happens, and we'll go from there. So 24 hours in, you can kind of see it through the murk that was on the edge of the carboy there. Definitely some small krausen going on inside there, and I'm just going to give these a little bit of a rousing, and I would say there's some gas production there, and we'll take a look at it. Yeah, same situation there. Perfect. And then finally, just the pineapple special here. Some super talented two-handed action here. And yeah, some gas activity there as well. All right, well, we're going to keep letting this go and see what happens. Well, the next morning I gave it a rip here too. And it was definitely more active even than it was yesterday. There wasn't this level of foam on it prior to rousing, but yeah, a very encouraging sign here to crunch through those last few points. Alrighty, well, I am going to draw samples here. These have had a week at 73 with the EC-1118 in them. There was definitely activity. That little bit of krausen foam that was in there has definitely dropped out, and getting nervous. So I'm going to toss my samples into there and get them chilled down so I can get a proper hydrometer reading. So in checking the gravities on all three of these, they all came down to 10-12, so they dropped, those two regular Kölsches dropped 6 points, and that pineapple one wound up just kind of crunching back down through the last couple of points that it needed to. So as far as the gravity is concerned, it is a success. So I wound up treating all of those carboys just like I do any of my carboys, where I let all of that yeast crash cool out, then I pressure transferred into sanitized corny kegs, chilled them down, gelatin fined, then transferred those into second kegs and carbonated. Now, the two straight up Kölsches I actually gave to a couple of friends of mine. I tasted them, and they were good. They certainly dried out the way I wanted to. I found that they were a little bit long in the tooth insofar as the actual age of the Kölsch goes. I generally prefer a younger, fresher Kölsch. This one is probably 2 to 3 weeks behind schedule where it would normally be, and I did find that it lost a little bit of that Kölsch yeast. I like to call it the sparkle, that sort of faded a little bit. It was a little bit muted. I don't believe that's because of the yeast addition with that EC-1118. I'm pretty sure that's just the aging of the beer, and the fact that it was warmer for longer than it normally would be, and some of that just sort of dissipated. However, I do have the pineapple Kölsch here, and we're going to try that out on tap. So we're ready to go. I'm going to use a nice little Stange here. If you got the toys, use it. I'm just going to fill this up here. Ooh, just let it calm down for a quick sec. Certainly pretty enough. So, now with this, remember, it was just that small bag of frozen pineapple that went in here. I think it was like 600 grams. And there's just the faintest note of pineapple there. It might even be in my brain, but we'll see. Well, yeah, there's a little bit of pineapple that comes out in this here. Actually goes pretty well with that Kölsch yeast, with the light fruitiness and whatnot of that. Yeah, actually this makes me want to take probably 5 times the amount of pineapple and dump it into another batch of this Kölsch here in the future. But either way, I think the comment is pretty similar to what I saw with the other one, where I'm just, the Kölsch yeast character is just, again, a little bit diminished. And I think that's just the age of this beer, because Kölsch should be consumed really nice and fresh, because that's when it really just shines, and this is just a little bit longer in tooth than it should have been. Yeah, so I've heard it said and suggested that dosing with EC-1118 can provide a little bit of an off flavor in the finished product. Some people swear that they can taste this yeast. However, I'm not noticing that at all in this Kölsch here. And in fact, I've actually used 1118 in fermenting meads and stuff in the past, and I didn't have any problem with those, but either way, yeah, tastes good. But I think for either of these, whether it was the one that I dosed with the 1118 or with the pineapple, I think this trick would have worked out quite a bit better if it had been more of a standard ale with a neutral yeast strain, because then I wouldn't be as worried about that character fading and being, you know, not 100% happy with the finished product. But insofar as actually getting the job done, yeah, the simple syrup addition seemed like a good idea, and the simple syrup itself, that sugar got crunched through, but it really didn't carry on from there. It had to be that yeast addition with that 1118, and that definitely got the job done. But either way, I've got a really pretty looking pretend wannabe pineapple Kölsch that I'm certainly going to enjoy when it's nice and sunny out, which is going to be tomorrow. So yeah, there you go. A little trick for you. Until next time, keep it 11.